just two people going into a relationship requires intentional commitment. When you have other people involved, it is much bigger.
When a couple brings two families together, they make a really intentional commitment and they consider all that they're committing to.
This is Rhea, and this is Just the Who of Us, where we talk about a range of topics, including life events, current events, spirituality, entertainment, family relationships, as well as answering listener questions and more.
I feel one thing that you and I had talked about before was that it seems really important to me that when a couple brings two families together as a blended family, that they really think about the commitment that they're making, that they make a really intentional commitment, and that they consider all that they're committing to. Because when we're talking about a blended family, we're talking about children are involved, and there are other people involved. So where it's, the couple has the romantic feeling maybe, and the feeling of being sure about the commitment, everybody else in the family may not feel all the same feelings, and there's going to be a variety of feelings. So really, to bring families together that way, I think they set themselves up for success best by really thinking about what they're committing to up front and making a really intentional commitment to each other and their family, and to how they're going to support each other when things are difficult, because inevitably things are difficult at some point. Life is just that way.
Yeah, yeah, 100%, 100%. And so one of the things that you and I talked about were kind of our relationships with our first husbands. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and so we are currently moving. We're not currently, we're going to be moving in the next few months. And so I just talked to my ex-husband the other day, and we were talking about, okay, well, this is the area that we're looking to move, and he is going to be moving soon too. And, we're trying to correlate because we co-parent and we co-parent very consistently. And so, it just doesn't make sense if we're both moving, it doesn't make sense to not discuss and kind of go in the same place. And luckily he's open to doing that. He has the kind of education and career that he could take really anywhere. So, it's convenient, and it's a blessing. It's a blessing to have that kind of relationship with someone that you used to have a romantic relationship or a marriage with and don't anymore. My parents never had that. And even after my father's passing, there's just certain things I can't really talk about because it's just that kind of relationship that was between the two of them, that as supporting as and as loving as my mom is, I just can't really discuss, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I'm glad that like our children don't have to feel like that, when the time comes, because of the relationships that we chose to have after our relationships, and that, we still have kids together. And
Mm-hmm.
and I would never want the kind of relationship to where we're at odds. We can't
Mm-hmm.
co-parent successfully that way, not in a healthy way anyway.
Mm-hmm. Well, and you're bringing up another aspect of commitment that you're making in your situation, where you're with another person now that you're committed to,
Yeah.
but you have a commitment to your children with your first, your
Yeah.
ex-husband or your ex, and so there it's just a very complex set of dynamics. So the best you can do to really work well together and show respect for each other, because that's what makes people want to work together, is when they feel, respected, and they feel like it's a two-way street.
Yeah.
That's definitely another part of the formula for success, for sure, for
Yeah.
sure. So it's really complicated, but if it works well, it's beautiful. And
Yeah,
my
yeah,
first husband and I have that same kind of thing. Both of our parents were divorced, and his parents, you couldn't put the two of them in the same room. They wouldn't be, they couldn't get along enough to just be civil. But
that
my
would be fun.
parents got
Yep.
along well. And
Okay.
so my ex-husband really, I think, learned a lot from my parents being able to get along, because when I met him, not only had his parents been divorced, but he had been divorced.
Okay.
So, he had a slew of his own experience. And, again, another piece of this is the trauma that each
Yeah.
person has experienced, because there's loss in these, changing relationships. And so there's a lot there to be sensitive to, and to try to understand in each other. But I think my first husband didn't know that it could be a peaceful kind of thing, So
Yeah.
I think, really learned from my parents that it doesn't have to be adversarial, and how painful it is as the child and as the person who's getting divorced. So when we got divorced, he didn't want that. I honestly give
Yeah.
him a lot of credit for how well we get along, because everybody else in his family who's been divorced, they didn't play it that way. And
Yeah.
so I'm really grateful. You say it's a blessing. I totally agree. It's a blessing for everybody involved. For me, for him,
Hmm.
for our kids, for the rest of the family. I still have a relationship with my stepson from that marriage that he supports.
Oh, that's
He
great.
invites
That's
me
fabulous.
to the family gatherings so that I can see him too. So,
Yeah.
it's best for everybody. My mother said at one point she had found, it was a quote in a puzzle, that like a word puzzle that she was doing, that when children are given leave to love, they find that there's plenty of love to go around. It's not that you have to take one side against another,
Yeah.
that there's enough love for everybody if people involved are open to it.
Right. Right. So so the work that you do, before we dive deeper anymore into our, personal lives,
Yeah.
because really we have so much in common that we could just talk about this like literally until your next meeting. But
Yeah.
I do want to introduce you a little bit.
Mhm.
So Miss Julie this is just your first episode with me, because we had such a wonderful conversation, and we realized that there are so many things that we could talk about that we have in common, but also that you can touch on because of your life experience and your education and expertise. And so I'm really, really happy to have you here. And so the first thing that we're going to be talking about today is blended families and kind of our experience, as well as the services that you provide in that kind of area. Tell me a little bit about your educational background and then your life experience, because those two things kind of led you to your career field currently.
Mhm. Mhm. Well, I initially went to college for business degree, and the reason was because I was really trying to be practical, but I'm not. And it served me well, because it's kind of going to be if you're an entrepreneur, you got to be doing some business too.
Right.
But I'm really more like, the part that I enjoy is the people part. So, at one point, my husband and I had the opportunity to buy, it was really a facility, but a small childcare business from his mother. And there's a whole story that goes along with that, but it wasn't something that we even really considered. But
Mhm.
we sort of said thanks, but no thanks. And we got talked into doing it that day. We gave our notices at our jobs the next day. So
Wow.
with a toddler, and his son was about, I think, 10, we had no, paying job between us, and we started this business. It was childcare, very small childcare business at the time. And we grew it to a 4 classroom, 35 or 40 children, which is a small center, but it was
Mhm.
still, it was it was a pretty busy operation. And so that was my entree into the world of early childhood, which is the field that I work in. Since
Mhm.
then, I've been executive director of a nonprofit childcare program here in New Hampshire. I've also been a Head Start director. And so for the past 7 or 8 years, I've been a contractor working primarily to implement a framework for social emotional development called pyramid model, which can be found in, I think, probably close to 40 states and around the world. It's an evidence-based framework that we're really working on building the infrastructure for in the state, and it's a beautiful world to be a part of. So I'm a coach working with leadership teams on the systems that support it, and I also coach individual practitioners and teams of practitioners on practices them in the classroom. And
Mhm.
as well, I do training. So, and I do some consultation also. So, through that work and my own experience, I've been thinking about how important it is to build relationships by through communication and understanding the reason for challenging behavior and all of those kinds of things. So now I'm developing my own thing about supporting blended families, because I have a lot of personal experience, and
Mhm.
my work has helped me to understand. I also have two master's degrees. So the first one is in drug and alcohol services, community psychology with a focus on drug and alcohol services, and then a master's in education as well.
Mhm.
And I have ongoing training in trauma informed services for the work that I do. So I've
Nice.
been in monthly doing reflective practice and training on that for the past several years as well. That's part of the pyramid model work. And we do, work on anti-bias, focus for our work as well. So it's really pretty well rounded, and I could just see how it applies. I'm talking about these concepts applying in the classroom in early childhood programs, but it's kind of like the concept of everything I ever needed to know I learned in kindergarten, because these are concepts that work for all of us. We're
Yeah.
people.
Yes.
So we want to be seen and heard, and we want to be understood. And, relationships need to be two ways. And,
Mhm.
so I can see how easy it is to be excited to bring a family together, and then, sort of maybe with all the best of intentions, look back and say we could have set a stronger foundation. I can say I wish that my husband and I had done that.
Right.
So some of it is my lessons learned about what's gone well
Mhm.
and the relationships that I still have, and some of it is lessons learned about what hasn't gone so well, which is, sometimes the fertile ground for learning.
Yes. One thing I was going to say is that oftentimes it's our failures to succeed that kind of guide us in certain directions. It teaches us, okay, what to do in the next similar situation and whatnot, you know. And for me personally, my first marriage is so completely different than my current situation because in certain aspects, I was much, much younger. I was like 20. I'm much closer to 40 now. So I've learned, how to approach certain things much differently, different life experience, different education, all these things that it's funny because, you mentioned that your education relatively for myself, we both have education, certain aspects of education that we don't necessarily specifically use or like our job title isn't that. However, that education is extremely effective in what we're currently doing. For me, I have a master's in psychology. I'm not a practicing psychologist, However, along with my life coaching certification, it's super helpful in this even, it's super helpful in parenting. My psychology has an emphasis on family dynamics. So even, things like my own family or even, life experiences my kids have with their friends and things like that. It's kind of funny, I guess, because, you know, I know for myself when I set out to get this specific education, I was like, all right, this is what I'm going to do with this education. This is why I want it. And I am not doing that. But I'm okay with that because I'm still able to have success with what I'm doing, even though the path didn't look exactly how I planned it out, kind of thing.
Hmm.
I also think that it's one thing that has kind of helped me in both of my relationships. So with my ex-husband and with my fiance, because that's those relationships they're special to navigate, like, and even in the beginning. So I imagine your second husband probably was like mine and like, okay, well, I don't think that you guys like have a thing going on, but I'm not used to exes getting along. So like it's kind of a thing I have to get used to. That was, for him, he's like,
Hmm.
because actually his parents were never married. They were together, got pregnant, and even so, didn't even end up going through his life in the same state. So they lived in the
Hmm.
same state where they met. His mother ended up moving here. And so, although his father is very verbally active in his life, he doesn't, he hasn't seen him in a long time, but they have a really good relationship because they communicate a lot and things like that. Whereas he grew up here with his mom, um, you know, I, my parents didn't get along. His parents got along. They never had any issue with each other. It was just that, they weren't married. They were just kind of, and life went different directions and that's just what happened. So our experiences, and then you have me with my experience with my ex-husband, what it was and what it is. So really we have like multiple dynamics and perspectives of marriages and relationships that kind of influence ours, but also in a way that's like, okay, how can we do this differently? Because although
Hmm.
certain people get along now, that wasn't always the case, and we don't want to kind of repeat that history. You know,
Hmm.
um, we aren't married yet. We currently have a child we are raising together that we don't share biology. However, he was with me first, and my fiance kind of became the second parent a couple years into his life because that's when we moved in together and things like that. Now, he was in his life before that, but in separate households and things like that. So yeah, and then I have the four children that I had before we got together. And he has no children except for the child we share. So there's a lot of dynamics going on.
Hmm.
Super blended family. My ex-husband still comes to my family events. We just had a 50th birthday for my cousin this past weekend, and he was there. He came with the girls, and my fiance was there too. It's not really weird for my ex-husband. It is still weird for my fiance, you know.
Hmm.
Is
Hmm.
but my grandmother, my mom's mom, her and her husband divorced. He was just like a serial cheater. And he was married like 8 times. But I know she was one of the first. But, and then you have my mom, my parents divorced. My mom never remarried. My father did. But the rest of the family, my uncle, him and his wife have been married since they're like 20s. His both their daughters have been married. They have all their children with the same man, their husband. Then you have like my father's family. Everybody there is married, or not everybody, but most of them are married. Only one of my aunts isn't married. She doesn't have any kids. It's just so there's a lot of like influences on both of our sides. I think that most of the people in my fiance's family is married and have been married, for so it's like we have mixed influences. We do have a lot of positive, strong marriages that lasted, but then we also have other things, and I feel like that's really common. And I would imagine that's something that you've come across in your experience, that it's probably a mixture. You know what I mean? Like, um, so I don't know. I just felt the need to tell you all that because
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that. I'm enjoying getting to know you and learning your story. I would say that this brings up a concept that I think applies in my work and also in families is that everybody's different.
yes,
And,
yes,
so in my work with programs, every childcare program is different and every leadership team is different and so it's individualizing. And when I work with any any of the above, a team, an individual, it's never me coming in and saying, this is what you should do.
yeah,
It's
like this
more me
is, yeah,
coming in saying, I have some perspective that might be helpful for you in thinking through your situation, but you're the expert on your situation, and I'm helping you with that. I am also a lifelong learner. I'm still learning things about myself. I understand that a
yeah,
lot of what makes people behave the way that they do is their the experiences that they've had when they were young. And
hmm,
sometimes people don't really even understand that. So, so it's a matter of like some of the things that are really important that are challenging for people to do is perspective taking. Like, how do you really understand the other person's point of view?
yes,
But every family, your family, all the people that you just talked about, every one of those households, they're all different, but they have
mhm,
some things in common. And
yeah,
sometimes, like when I've been married twice. The first time I married someone whose parents were also divorced, and he was divorced. He understood very well about that whole thing from his perspective. My
mhm,
second husband, his parents had been never been divorced, and he had been divorced just recently at that point, but his ex-wife's parents had not been divorced, I think. And so there was a perspective that he didn't take as easily. You know what I mean? He didn't have the frame of reference to understand what it feels like to be the child when the parents are divorced. But
yeah,
then people whose parents haven't divorced also have a whole range of, oh, it was a wonderful, relationship to grow up with, and some
right,
who it was really difficult and they wish they had gotten divorced. So there are
yeah,
no assumptions to make, but it's a matter of being curious, having some concepts that tend to carry, but really being curious about the individual situation and kind of a sort of a problem solver to say, like, where are the strengths? How do you build the strengths? And where are the weaker links? Because your system is only as strong as the weak link. And
yeah,
so you want to set the foundation. But again, I think people come together with the best of intentions, but it's easy to think everything's going to be great when you're early on and everything feels great. But, just realistically, with, not putting any blame on anybody, just the way life is, things are easy sometimes and fun sometimes, and sometimes they're not,
yeah,
so what are you going to do? Like, one of my first things with people will be, what is it about this family that is so important to you that you're going to stick with it no matter how difficult things get? Because, the divorce rate or the failure rate for families is pretty high.
yeah,
And for
yeah,
blended families with the added level of, complication, it's like managing complex change. There's a lot of moving parts. There are a lot of different factors. And so it takes, again, I think a really intentional commitment and going in with eyes wide open and not to say like, what's my exit strategy going to be? That's the kind of way people tell you to prepare for marriage. But what I'm talking about is like, how are we going to set up the strongest foundation for our family
Yes.
so that we're going to be able to move through, support each other through the challenging times?
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. The question that I had written down in my notes was what you just said. What is important to you about family to make you stick with it? And, you know, it is a question. I know a couple who they went through the pastor at the church that we were going to. They did the marriage, I guess like marriage prep before they got married. I mean, she shows me this stack of papers that her and her fiance have to go through, and it's just questions, things to think about, scenarios. And I was like, that is freaking fabulous because I feel like if all of us did that, one of two things would happen. We would either get to know our to be partner so much better, or we would realize that, you know what, this person and this partnership that I thought was for me actually might not be. And that's okay too. And that's one reason that you have these conversations and, you prepare before you go into this partnership. I feel like,
Right.
Now I wouldn't say that I wouldn't have married my first husband because we have amazing kids together and I love him as a person. So I wouldn't take that experience back. There's been times where of course, I've been like, I wish I would have done certain things differently because I feel like he deserved for me to do that and my children deserve for me to do that, and he's expressed the same thing. However, we're both at certain points in our lives where we just had to kind of learn how to make it up to one another in the current position that we are to one another, and we're not reconciling the marriage that's over. However, let's focus on the current people that we are in life and what our relationship is to one another now. And I know that, that's something you can relate to with your first marriage. It's a wonderful thing because,
Yeah, absolutely.
Why put, and it's not always possible, sometimes both people can't or won't just put whatever aside to focus on what really matters. Sometimes, it happened with my parents, and one was hurt. There was a lot of hurt on one person's side because the other person moved on and one person never did. And, there's some things now that I'm not going to go into too much detail, but since recent events, there are some things that I'm finding out, and it's helping me to kind of understand both my parents a little bit more, in why certain things went this way with one parent and this way with the other. I wish I could go back in time and change that for the one that suffered more, It's not for me to do, but it's like I love that parent and I would like to change that for them. And maybe all of our lives would have been different. So then it's like, well, would I really? Because maybe my life would have been different. And I love the children that I have and the people I have in it. So it's like, it's a rabbit hole kind of like thing.
I know. And I understand what you're saying about kind of wishing you could make it better for somebody in the past. But as a parent, I'm sure you can relate to saying that your parents would want you to do, like make it better for yourself.
Yeah.
And that would make it better for them.
Right.
That even like a lot of parents, myself included, would sacrifice a lot for my kids.
Yes.
So I would rather they grow stronger in spite of whatever the challenges are that they lived through because of my, marital, like the divorce of their parents.
Right.
And, with my first husband, we really, I think, have done a great job. The kids, I think, have done really well, and they never have felt like they had to choose, and they feel like they can be comfortable with all of us together. And,
Yeah,
that's
I
really is
love
an
that.
amazing thing. Yeah.
Yes, 100%.
I think one of the reasons that you wrote down the idea of what's the most important thing to you is because I told you that analogy of the river and the house across the river.
Yes.
This is what I tell people to get in touch with what I'm talking about is, if you imagine yourself on this side of the river and on the other side is a house, and in the house is a bed, and on the bed is a $10 bill. How hard are you going to try to get across a river for a $10 bill? Most
Hmm.
people would say not all that hard. But now, if you would think of the same thing, but a little different, you're on this side of the river, and on the other side of the river is a house. In the house is a bed. On the bed is a $10 bill. But this time, next to the $10 bill is your baby, and the house is on fire. Now
Yeah.
nothing's gonna stop you. You're going to get, but with the $10 bill, you might have said there's no way to do it.
Hmm.
But when it's your
100%.
baby, there's nothing going to stop you. That's what I'm talking about. The compelling reason that people, this relationship, this family is your baby. And
Yes.
so, what are you going to do to care for that relationship and that family and protect it from, to make sure that you're successful?
I absolutely love that analogy too. It's clear, I mean, you have the same things to get to. However, in one instance, this is your life, like this is part of your life. This is a part of you. And it makes it
Well, it's visceral. You like feel it.
yeah,
You can feel the
it's
difference when you hear
relatable.
that story.
It's
Yeah.
emotional. Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
It's
And I think our culture has really, and I don't want to go down that road, but I mean, I think it is a pretty like immediate gratification society, like with all the
mhm,
technology and everything that happens so fast.
yeah.
Again, it's sort of like without realizing how much that has become our way of life. I think it's a healthy thing to go back to
Mhm.
what really is important to me about this particular thing when it's something that really the stakes are high. You
Yes.
don't want to, be you get together because you really do want it to last forever, right? You do
Mhm.
want the best
Yeah.
thing for your kids. So but it still sneaks up on a lot of us, and I understand how that feels as well. But I feel like it doesn't need to be that way, and I really want to help families to be successful.
Yeah. It's funny. So, like I said, being a child of divorce, I've been divorced. This will be my second marriage. I, have different kids with different people. Certain children were planned, certain children weren't. You would think that, or I would think, as maybe somebody looking in from the outside, also as well as like other people I know and knowing how they think, people that have been in certain situations, people I grew up around and stuff like that. It almost seems like it would be my philosophy for my kids to be like, I just kind of do whatever the hell you want. However, I would really prefer them being in, you know, go to school, get your education, get into your adult relationship, plan a solid future, have a solid, and then have plan your finances, then have children, and just do these things a certain way. Or if you don't want to have children, that's
Mm-hmm.
fine. But plan a stable future for yourself, and that is something I desperately want for all of my kids. My oldest, he's not in a relationship. He focuses on work and things like that. My oldest son, my oldest daughter, she is in a relationship, and she is in college, and she's also working, and her relationship mindset is, I am not treating this as, and I don't mean this in like a raunchy way, but like, I'm not treating this my husband, because we are still young and we are still getting to know one another. And I
Mm-hmm.
appreciate that about her, because I know, myself included, certain people that have, rushed into certain things, and it just didn't work out. And that's okay sometimes that it doesn't work out, but it's the scars and the unhealthy parts of
Mm-hmm.
it that you want to shield your children from, right? And
Mm-hmm.
didn't think that I would always feel that way. There was a part of me when I was younger, I was just like, they could do what they want to do. If they want to live this way, if they, don't want to be married, blah, 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 whatever. And I'm not saying that marriage is always like the answer, but
Right.
I do kind of have that more traditional values that I would like for my
Hmm.
children to have. It's just a healthier situation.
Hmm. Well,
It,
I think what I hear you saying is like, wanting a life for your children where they don't take on uh, the next level of responsibility in their lives before they're really ready for it.
yes.
And then you're that traditional thing seems sort of like, kind of getting back to the basic values of what's really important. And it's relationships in the end. Most of the time, it's not the
Yeah.
stuff or the status or whatever, but,
Yeah.
you know, the relationships that really matter to you and
Hmm.
to be able to spend time with those people. And, so looking back, that's one kind of healthy exercise is like, if I looked back at this point at the end of my life, what would I wish I had done? What would I want myself to have done now? Because I don't want to look back and regret, like
Yes.
I held myself back and didn't give what I could have given, or I let something go on too long that wasn't serving me. And,
Yeah.
always with a respect. I mean, if, but definitely, with our kids, we want them to be thinking about things in a way that supports them in making decisions that they're not going to regret. Getting into things that they're not quite ready for can be really difficult.
Absolutely. I want to touch on another thing that you mentioned, that was the importance of intentional commitment. And, you know, that can be applied in a lot of areas, your education, your family, your life goals, but in regards to blended families, um,
Hmm.
the importance of intentional commitment. Can you kind of elaborate on that for me a little bit?
Yeah, I think each individual has certain goals, and so when people come together, they have maybe a new set of goals for them together as a couple.
Hmm.
But when you have, and when you, my personal feeling is when people choose to get married, that is a pretty high level of commitment.
Yeah.
But then if it's just those two people who are directly involved, um, that's a that's a big responsibility to each other. But
Right.
when you have each each person brings with them other, children from previous and even their exes that you want to be co-parenting with respect.
Hmm.
There are a lot more people who are being impacted, and they don't necessarily get a vote in what's happening. So there's a
Yeah.
different level of, to be respectful to, there's a different level of preparation for them,
Mhm.
so, and understanding the different ways that people might be feeling. But if the couple makes a really intentional commitment to each other, understanding that what they're committing to is not just this marriage, but it's
Yeah.
that other person's family, those kids that, and we have different relationships with every individual. I've learned that from childcare. You're caring for all these kids and you have different relationships with different ones because your personalities will gel with some people and kind of, be a little prickly with others. You
Yeah.
can learn to be loving and respectful with all of those people, even if you don't feel like you relate as well to some as to others. But in blended family relationships, sometimes there are some antagonistic relationships. And I think it's prudent to be realistic about that going in, not to say you would encourage it or you would want it to
Right.
happen or that you're making any assumptions, but being respectful that people have been through a lot when they get to this point and they may be resistant to this new person or whatever the case may be. The step siblings could be resistant to each other. people think, somebody's getting favored, and it's hard for the parents to really be fair, be even with all of the kids for lots of reasons,
Yeah,
even with your
yeah,
own kids. But when
absolutely.
it's a very complicated situation that, again, there's more love to go around.
Yeah.
And it's also, sometimes it's really challenging to bring all of that love to fruition because of a lot of other things. So without a really intentional commitment and an understanding of what you're committing to and how are we going to support each other as the leaders of this family,
Yes. Hmm.
because that's what the parents are, the leaders of the family. Leaders, that does not mean the king and queen who,
Right.
or two queens or two kings, whatever it may be.
Right.
It doesn't
Right.
mean
Yeah.
the boss necessarily. It's the leader, the people who want to bring out the best in the family as a family and each individual. So I don't know if that was too much round and round and round, but
No,
but yeah, I think that, the intentional commitment is really important, I think.
yeah, yeah. It's like you said, like just two people going into a relationship requires intentional commitment, specifically a marriage, a partnership. But when you have other people involved, it is a much bigger thing. And then, too, you've got the outside people. My oldest daughter, her father is not involved. My oldest son, his he's he'll text once in a while. But then you have my younger two girls who their father is involved. He's involved on a regular basis. And so even in that, someone coming into that situation, my fiance most certainly had to have intentional commitment because there's a lot of dynamics just within this,
Oh yeah. Yeah. Right.
And
Even just your kids could be feeling like, some feel abandoned by their fathers and the other, and then feel envious. Maybe, I mean, I'm not saying that they
yeah,
do, but
no,
they
but
certainly could.
that
You
is
could
a thing.
understand how that could happen, and then
Yeah.
to address that, because that's real for them.
100%. And luckily my older two children, because they were fairly young when my ex-husband and I got together, they are very close to him. Even through our separation and our divorce, they still have a relationship with him. And so and then my fiance actually knew because we went to high school together. So he had been around my older children when they were little too. They have a good relationship with him. My daughter's having a good relationship with him, kind of, it was a process because they already have a dad, So now I got this man who's trying to tell me what to do, like he's my dad, and how teenagers are. And how they are with their own parents, their own, telling them what to do sometimes. But then you have this other person. So it is like it for us, but specifically for the person coming in, it takes, not specifically, equally, really, it does. It takes a lot of intentional commitment from the adults because we are the ones who are leading the children and leading the family. And so I 100% agree with that. It's even kind of selfish of me to say, but I'm going to say it because it's true. I don't know that I could be a stepmom. And I say this because, I've seen the relationships between exes and, whatever. I've seen it with other people. Like I said, I have a good relationship with my ex-husband, but not everybody has that. And you just see things and it's like, I don't know that I would have like the patience for that, or seeing someone else treat him badly just because they're not in a relationship anymore, or your relationship with your ex can affect how your children or your child sees your current partner, and just these, all those kind of things. And I just don't think I'm cut out for that. So I'm glad that he doesn't have any children because
well, I mean, I think all of those things are all factors in the dynamics that I'm talking about, and because those are really challenging.
Yeah.
But, I think the situation that you're in, I'm happy for you that it's working out so well. But I think sometimes it can be hard for the person who doesn't have the same frame of reference to be able to understand. And so it sounds like you've got a great guy who can wrap his head around all it, that comes along with you. But
Yeah.
I had a boyfriend between when I had been divorced the first time, and he didn't have any kids. He had been married before, but he didn't have any kids. And I thought, oh, this is going to be, great, because there's no two different exes and two schedules and all that stuff. But it was too much for him he couldn't, he just anything that took my attention away from him, he was resistant to. And so I couldn't, and in that respect, it was hard because I didn't want to introduce the kids to somebody until I really felt like there was some potential in the relationship. And then I find out he can't really handle the, fact that I have kids. So I kind of wished I'd known that sooner, but you just can't do it perfectly. You just can't do it perfectly.
No, that's a profound statement too, because you can't, there is no perfect way to do this. And like, yeah, I'm glad that you said that, because I think it's something that people need to hear, people who are in these kinds of situations. That is important to know. You're not going to do it perfectly. There is no perfect way, because literally no two families are the exact same. No two people are the exact same. Twins aren't even the exact same in every aspect, so that there's no perfect way.
But I think that it's also, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to.
No, I was just gonna say, you just have to do your best, and being attentive and putting effort into the situation and being intentional and things like that. That is the best way to get to your best solution for your scenario.
Yeah, I agree. And what I was thinking also is that I feel like it's important for us as parents to show our kids what we would think is the best thing to do when you've made a mistake. If I wish that I had done something differently, then, like the times when I have a good relationship with my kids. We rarely ever argue or anything, but the times that I've gotten mad and raised my voice or something, I will say to them afterwards, I did mean what I said. I've never said anything really, disrespectful or whatever, but I might say it passionately. So I say, I meant what I said, but I'm very sorry about the way that I said it. I want to be respectful to you. And I know that I yelled at you, and that's not a respectful way for me to talk to you. So I'm modeling for them how to behave when you've made a mistake. If you never make a mistake, then you don't have that opportunity. And that's a learning moment for yourself and for the child. So I think, again, in a complicated situation, you do have a lot of opportunities to do that, to talk about, like, how can we work this out? And, what could I have done differently? But just always from a strength-based kind of perspective, always trauma informed, always thinking with sensitivity to what everybody's been through to get to where we are now. And, so I really do feel like nurturing the relationships with compassion can really build a very strong foundation, a very strong family, and really strong relationships. So I'm looking forward to the opportunity to work with families on that.
I love it. I absolutely love it. I really enjoyed talking with you, and I can't wait to have you back a few more times.
Awesome. That's awesome, because I'm really enjoying it too. So just let me know. Great to talk with you.
If anyone wants to chime in, or if anybody has questions they want us to answer or topics to discuss, you can leave that on the Facebook page. Visit www.philolity.net. That's FALOLITY.